Jay, we're back again with another episode thanks to our Dig Me Out Union on Patreon. You can help us make the next episode happen by joining us at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. Jay, it's another interview episode. Can you believe it?
I can. I'm excited about this one.
Yes. That means Chip's back with us. How you doing, Chip? It's been a while.
It has been. I'm thinking we should have we talked about having a theme song for me, right? Like maybe Rat's Back for More would be good.
There you go.
I'm back for more. I'm back for more interviews.
So share with us and our audience, who is joining us on this episode as far as being interviewed?
So this is an epic 2-hour long interview, but I promise you it's very worth it. Joining us this time around is Jeremy Toback. Dig Me Out listeners probably know Jeremy from if you read liner notes and if you're familiar with the band Brad, which you guys have reviewed a Brad record and you interviewed Shawn Smith. Jeremy was one of the members in the early days of Brad. He played on the first 2, maybe 3 records, and then kind of spun off and did his own solo career.
I remember the first solo record, Perfect Flux Thing. Jay, did you have that?
I did. Yeah. I remember getting it when it came out because I was pretty excited about his involvement in Brad. I thought he brought the supergroup vibe to their sound. Like with his material was a little bit different. His voice was a little bit different. It just rounded the record out. So when he left, I was a little disappointed, and I was curious to see what his solo stuff would be like. So I do remember picking that record out.
He and we talk about it, of course, in the interview. But the Another True Fiction is his follow up to Perfect Flux Thing, and it just came out at a weird time. We talk about it in the interview, but he ended up on the Lollapalooza side stage the year that Korn headlined. But he's definitely more of a singer-songwriter. We talk about this a little bit in the interview, but I always thought of him as like, and you'll hear me say this, but I always thought of him, if Dave Matthews was like the granola-eating college bartender in a frat town, Jeremy Toback was like the equal, but in a coffee shop as a philosophy major at an Ivy League school. Like they're sort of the same people, and they might have the same influences somewhere along the lines, but I think fans of both would appreciate each other. And we talked about that, but that was what was kind of popular at that time. And, like I said, 2 hours, so we should cut to it, but I will say there's a couple times in the interview where we're 30 years, 25 years, 30 years past those albums and those releases. And Jeremy does give a couple, I would say, exclusives. They're 30 years later, but drop some bombs about maybe some of the days in Brad and some of the contractual stuff that he wasn't real happy with and his reason for leaving the band. Again, we talked for almost an hour about his joining Brad in the first record. We barely touched upon anything after that with Brad, and then jumped into the second half. He, a little spoiler, if you're not going to sit through the 2 hours, maybe you want to fast forward to the end of it. I did ask him if he had a chance to kind of talk to Shawn and kind of reconnect with the guys because they've been apart for some time, and he does tell a story about how he reconnected with them and kind of somewhat of a personal story about talking to Shawn and seeing Shawn for the last time. Maybe not the last time, I'm sorry, but reconnecting with him. He said he had never told anybody that story before. So
wow,
that's good stuff.
So cool.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to listening to this. So let's get into it. This is Chip's interview with Jeremy Toback.
All right. So Jeremy, welcome to the Dig Me Out podcast. It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you, man. It's been a minute.
Yeah, I was going to say it's been, I think we met in person. Maybe. You and I were talking before we started recording about the memories. I'm almost positive I saw you in Columbus at Lollapalooza.
Oh, okay, great.
And like we may have met, I imagine we met there in like 1997-ish.
Yeah, I was on that Lollapalooza.
But I don't really have strong memories of meeting you there. So we've talked on the phone once, and I'm going to give a little bit of the story about how we met. I don't know if you remember, but I remember distinctly, although my 90s memories are fading.
Yeah.
I was at Used Kids Records in Columbus, Ohio. I was going through the CDs, and Used Kids obviously sold used CDs and promo CDs. And we'll get to this in a second, but had your first solo EP, did that come out after you were on the Brad record?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going through the CDs and like your name popped out, and I couldn't remember if it was because I knew it from Brad or whether I just randomly picked out a Jeremy Toback CD, but I got the EP. But I distinctly remembered, I still have the CD with the sticker. It was a $3 sticker from the EP. But the thing that was cool, and that was like early-ish days of the internet, and you had an AOL email address, I think, on the back or on the inside. And I sent you an email, and I don't remember what it said, but I think I basically said I picked up your CD and I really like it a lot. And I was writing for a magazine at the time, I think, maybe. All I know is that I emailed you and you responded. And that was maybe like one of the early interactions I've ever had with an artist of like, it was almost like, you know, you and I growing up sending letters off to a PO box and getting a response was amazing.
Yeah, totally. Like I sent a letter to Asia.
Oh, really?
And I got like the form response, you know, the boys are so glad to hear from you.
Oh, that's awesome. But yeah, so it's been,
you know.
yeah. So, I mean, that was like 1997. So you and I have traded notes back and forth. You know, there's probably been years where we haven't talked, but again, it's really cool to be able to like actually see you and talk to you this way instead of over a phone or through email. So
yeah. I mean, and that's like the sort of joy of like my like really out of date email list. Is like there's just people on there from like, and if your email address is still good, we're going to be in touch. You know. Yeah.
So in the intro, we talked about kind of how many of the Dig Me Out listeners might know you. But let's talk about that a little bit. You were in the band Brad with Shawn Smith.
Yes.
Let's talk actually a little bit about how you got to be in Brad. So I actually just read an interview this morning that you did, I don't know when, a couple of years ago maybe, and that you had been in a band was it in New Jersey? You'd been in a band that's something.
I had a call that had nothing to do with Brad, but I had a band. I went to Princeton and we had a band called Noise Pedals, like flower petals. Very much like an REM, like we did covers and originals. I love that band,
but that was like in the late '80s, and that's sort of the start of your music career.
Totally, yeah.
And you picked up bass. I don't want to say. I think I read you were 15 when you picked up bass, so not later in life, but it was a little bit later than maybe some kids picked stuff up.
Oh, totally, yeah. Like very like late on, but it kind of came like it was like one of those things where it's like quickly became, I won't say good at it because it's like I was a young player, you know, too many notes and like my feel wasn't quite there, but like I definitely had a thing for it.
Yeah. And so you went to Princeton. So was that a high school band or a college band?
I did have a high school band, notably with Ryland Allison, whose dad was in Paul Revere and the Raiders, and Anthony Wilson, who plays with, I'm going to be really lame because she's a huge artist in her own right, but she's married to Elvis Costello.
Diana Krall?
He's an amazing guitar player. Like, so that I was in a band with that guy, like when I could barely play, and that guy was like already a jazz prodigy.
Yeah.
The band was not as good as its elements, I don't think, but yeah, that was Native Son, SUN, and then Noise Pedals was my college band, which was great. Included future lawyers and MD, PhD.
And you went to Princeton. Where did you grow up? Where were you born and raised?
I grew up in LA. I'm a SoCal kid. This is where I live now. We're in Laurel Canyon right here.
So was it Princeton because of your grades and your ambitions, or was it Princeton to get as far away from home as possible?
I was like really kind of, I mean, weirdly like a grinder in high school and just like that kid, and did 3 sports and jazz band. And I don't know what I was trying to prove to myself or the world, but like, yeah. So it was kind of like I got in, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And everybody was like, including the school, was like, well, you're going. And I went and ended up kind of not really, I went there for architecture, and I was like, I just sort of fell in love with music and school. It's not that I didn't do school while I was there, but it was like quickly became apparent that like music was going to be my thing. Like REM was happening, and I just fell hard and got my own band going, and that was what I was really into doing, you know. So
And then, so did you graduate from Princeton?
I did graduate. Yeah. I was like
And
4 years, you know.
and then quickly moved back to LA?
Yeah, it was kind of of like that band made a EP which is on Spotify, like through some ghost distributor. Like, we need to take it back so we can earn our 5 cents.
Right.
But I was the one who was like, let's keep going, and they were like, yeah, my parents aren't into that. Or, and so I was like, well, okay, fine, I'm gonna go back to LA. And my dad, who's deceased now, like great dude, was a commercial director, and I knew that I could be a production assistant and kind of just make the bare minimum and pursue music. And that's what, that's what I did.
So in LA, that was what, 91,
So
92
I
time?
graduated in 88.
Okay.
And I was here like for a bunch of years, drifting through different bands as a bass player and trying to make things happen. And by the time, do you want me to sort of like get us up to Brad real quick, like how that happened?
But I actually have, so being in LA in that time period, I think my high school friends and I, we were from Cleveland. There were more than 2 camps, but there was the camp of the REM and the Cure and alternative music, and then there was my camp of the Poisons and Motley Crues and stuff. So you're in LA at that time period. Did you fall into any of that hair metal stuff, or were you on the REM camp and not even paying attention to the big hair?
And that's great that you bring that up, because LA at that time was completely hair metal.
Oh yeah,
like it was when I got out of college. Like the ads, like no internet, so there was this thing called the Recycler, and there was LA Weekly, and you'd put ads in the Recycler, which is like we're selling used goods, like Craigslist, but the paper version. And it's like all the ads would be like, seeking raven-haired shredder, must have looks, and I'd be like, what the fuck? Like, sorry, there was no alternative college rock scene to speak of in LA. It was very small. I mean, there were some bands, like there was this band I think called Savage Republic that had their own really crafty vinyl label. And I forget what some of the bands were on there, but it's like they were older than I was, or more. I wasn't in that scene. So yeah, I was completely on the other side. And I did meet this guy, Rich Ferguson, who's an amazing poet, whose record we ended up being roommates at the time that I got into Brad. And he had like an ad for like the geometry of, God, what was it? Oh my God, he had the craziest ad in the Recycler. And I was like, this is the only person in here that I relate to. And I answered that ad, and we tried to make bands together. And it was like, well, we're still dear friends. Like,
oh, that's awesome.
There were so few of us. It was your camp, man. You guys were just dominating the scene.
So you never even entertained, like, I'm going to go try out for Jet Boy or LA Guns or those kind of bands?
I mean, not at all. I was into my aesthetic and into this stuff. And there was other things going on, obviously, right? Like you had in like Pedro, you had Pedro, you had like Minutemen and the Country Fire Hose. But those guys were already on their way. So the SST, and I wasn't really a punk rocker. Like I was really like Strum and Hum, REM, and Dreams So Real, and Miracle Legion. All like those are the bands that I was like super into.
Yeah. Okay. So now we can lead to, so you end up in Seattle. What was your trek from LA to Seattle and
so
the start of Brad?
That I did end up getting into like kind of a scene that was building up around this place called the INXS in like borderline Echo Park. Borderline Los Feliz, Silver Lake, and met these guys like Mark Stewart, who is in the Stew of the Negro Problem. I don't know. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We actually ended up co-writing, and this guy, Michael Whitmore, all these sort of people. And it also became the scene that would lead into the Silver Lake Lounge and the whole Silver Lake scene, right? So like that was happening, but I was basically in my apartment, like trying to write like the equivalent of like free jazz art songs. Like I was like, okay, nothing will repeat. like I'm trying to write the pure the most pure song ever written, and I don't care if nobody ever like understands it. And I was teaching speed reading. Like I had moved from sort of being a PA and an art dog. Art dogs are the people that like, that's a step above production assistant. You get to go like onto sets and like you're helping move furniture basically, but the department's really cool because everybody there's creative, right? And so I was doing that stuff, and then like I was like, ended up teaching speed reading, and this is like when I was really finally started to play out, starting to move towards playing out as like Jeremy Toback, like doing up mics and stuff. And I went up to visit my friend, like in between speed reading sessions. Like I'm a shitty speed reader, by the way. Like, what a terrible thing. Who wants to speed read? Slow read, dude. Like, I went up to visit my childhood best friend, this guy Alex Rosenast in Seattle. I had like a couple weeks off, and just crashed at his place. And this was sort of June of, it must have been like June of '93, or it might have been. Yeah, I'm trying to I get mixed up like when exactly that date is. It's before we made the first, because I think the Brad record came out in '93, so it had to be like the year before. And I went up there, and I'd heard about Alex's best friend, this guy Stone, and I knew he was in this band Pearl Jam, and I'd heard Alive on the radio, actually with my friend Rich. We were both The Poet. Has a great records, by the way, that I play bass on. And so we remember hearing Pearl Jam, that first record. It was totally not my music. Like, I was like, this is kind of cool, but like 70s stadium rock influence stuff, like whatever. But I know the guy, you know? And so I went up there and actually crashed in Stone's bed, and like the demo for 10 was there with like Jeremy on it. I'm like, that's funny. There's a song that's got my name on it, you know? And I did not meet, the first time I went up there, I didn't meet Stone, but the next time, which I think was the June of whenever the year that friggin' like Pearl Jam broke. The next time I went up there was literally June of that year. So Pearl Jam was getting off of tour. Stone by that point already had his own place because he was in Pearl Jam.
Right.
No longer rooming with Alex. Alex was the guy. Sorry, this is a little bit scatterfired, but Alex started Rock Candy, which was one of the seminal grunge clubs. Like, I think the video for Alive was shot there, and probably some other, like, I think maybe Soundgarden did a video there too.
And that's your childhood friend?
That's my childhood friend.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's weird. He moved to Seattle to study prosthetics at UW. His mom had like cancer, and he was like, okay, I don't know what I want to do. So like, she had to have her lower leg replaced. So he was like, okay, this is a business. I'll go up there, study that. He ends up meeting Stone. He ends up becoming best friends, and he tour manages Mother Love Bone, I think, on their last tour. I don't think that Alex was a good tour manager. I don't know how much tour managing was going on. I think there's a lot of misbehavior. That's how that connection happens. I go up there. I've been hearing about Stone. Stone's been hearing about me. And there was this moment I remember where we're sitting at this coffee house, and Seattle was like the vibe there was like nothing I'd experienced. The LA scene, since I was not in the hair metal scene, like I didn't know what that energy felt like. And my scene was so just sort of like underground and fractured and beginning. Like I'd never been in anything like that. The city was like, all of the alt kids, which was everybody, were just like, holy shit, we're in the gold rush. Like we're at the center of this thing, even though, and Regan, who would be the drummer, and Brad, this was at his coffee house. Him and his mom, I think, had this coffee house. It was called, I haven't done my homework, the Green Cat or something. It was called something.
Yeah.
And so you had on the one hand, like people who had become literally some of the biggest rock stars in the world, and people who are pulling, you know, lattes, at coffee shops who are still best friends, right?
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there and just kind of like there was this whole buzz going on, and there was this guy there with long hair, and I was like, I think that's Stone, and we're all at the same table, and I don't know half these people. I'm just kind of sitting there, and Stone at some point was like, "Who's this guy?" I'm like, "I'm Jeremy." And he's like, "Holy shit, you're Jeremy?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I think I actually have a picture of that meeting.
Oh, really?
If that's right around that time that Alex took, like that he sent me, and we just had a conversation, and we had a couple more interactions over that trip, but we really just kind of hit it off in this like kind of immediate way, talking about music and drummers and the way we both thought about drummers. And it was kind of cool. I didn't really think much of it. I'd already met Shawn and Regan on the previous trip and had a nice hang with those guys. And Shawn was this really shy but like sensitive dude who was clearly passionate about music, and we had a nice vibe, and Regan was really cool. I didn't really think much about it. They had a band called Bliss at the time, which would become Satchel. And they had this song that I remember Alex played me called Drift, which I don't know if it's even available anywhere. And I just fucking loved that song. And that was kind of it, right? And I went back to LA to teach speed reading. I hope that you can edit whatever the hell you want.
No. This is exactly what
okay.
I'm looking for and what our listeners
I'm just
love
like
to hear.
literally traveling through the cobwebs of my mind.
No, this is awesome. This is great.
Okay, cool. I go back to LA to teach speed reading. It's blistering hot, and I'm just like, this is not as fun as Seattle was.
Yeah.
You know, and I lived with Rich Ferguson in what I called like my tenement palace. It was like a total like $300 a month. I think we each paid, right?
Yeah.
And there were $1 burritos across the street. My vegetables were like the pickled carrots and jalapenos you got. Like I was just like, I'm in heaven. There was a bar that would later become like, now that neighborhood's totally bouged out, totally hipster bougie. Like the bar would later become like Silver Lake Ramen or something, and it was like we called it the Bar of Yellow Tape. It was like gay Mexican cowboys who would like shoot each other occasionally, and so there would always be yellow tape. Like they're like, and all the love for the gay Mexican cowboys. I'm like, no, like seriously, no feelings one way or other. But it was that vibe, like that kind of like things were all over the place, and it was not Silver Lake is not what it was now. And I remember we had no cell phones. We had one phone. I don't even know if we had an answering machine. So if you called us, one of us had to be there.
Right.
Get in touch with us. And I happened to be there when I think Rich picked up and Stone called. He got my number from Alex. And I was like, hey, dude, what's going on? Like, I did not expect to hear from Stone. He's like, hey, man, you know, this maybe seem out of the blue, but like, Regan and I and Shawn are going to like do some jamming in October, and I don't know, maybe we'll make a record. And like we hear you play, you know, I know you play bass. Alex says you're pretty good. You want to come play with us? And I was like, yeah, I play bass, but dude, I haven't practiced in like a year. I'm like literally at the piano trying to write these like free jazz improv songs. Like I don't really have my chops up. He's like, oh, time away from the instrument can be good, you know. I'm sure you'll be great. I was like, yeah, I'll do it, man. I'll practice and I'll get my shit together. Like October, it was like July.
Yeah.
And that was kind of it. Like that was the request. Later, they'd never heard me play. And like I remember Stone just being like, why? Like what was going, he was just, I think, really in the best way, high on his own supply. Just like he's like, I just helped form and you know, the biggest band in the world. And like now I'm gonna do like I feel like my artistic instincts are pretty good. And like, hello, Shawn Smith and Regan, right? Like both incredible talents, you know, and he's just like, I feel pretty good about this. And Alex says Jeremy can play, even though Alex, of his many gifts, music is not one of them, you know?
Right.
And Alex, as it turns out, had never heard me play bass. We'd grown up together, and his whole thing was like, well, I know Jeremy, I love Jeremy, and I know he's like a grinder. Like if he's into something, I bet he's good at it. And he didn't tell those guys he hadn't heard me, and they were just like, so is Jeremy good? And he's like, yeah, he's great. So that was kind of it. And I'm sorry the light keeps going in and out, but I guess it's audio here. So you know, it became this great thing because it was like, as I was teaching speed reading, I was like, this is terrible, I hate this. And I'm like, I'd be like teaching these kids, and they'd be like punky junior high kids or whatever. I'd be like, yeah, so by the way, I'm going to make a record with the guy in Pearl Jam in the fall. They'd be like, sure, teach. Whatever, fuck you.
Yeah.
And so that was it. And literally, I went up there, and as it turns out, I don't even know if this was like an explanation that was made clear to me, but I was like, why me? I think that was part of the phone conversation. Like, why are you talking to me? And it was actually, and Stone was like, well, you know, there's a bass players in Seattle, but like everybody's going to make a big thing out of this, you know? And I just get a good vibe from you that you're not really caught up in it. And I'm like, I'm not. Like, I mean, I get that you're in Pearl Jam and stuff, but like, it's not my thing. Like, I love, like, it's cool, but like,
Yeah.
you know, like I'm not tripping. And so that was kind of the vibe. And we got up there, and yeah, I mean, I can go on, but you know, feel free to interrupt. So that's
no, keep going. No, I love it. So, because Stone was in Pearl Jam, was it sort of like understood that he's got whatever he wants to do as a side thing or a vanity thing is going to get released? Or did you go up there just as a, let's hang out and let's see what we can make out of this? Or was it pretty clear that this was going to come out?
Yeah. So it wasn't clear that it was going to come out. It was clear that like, I don't know if it was communicated to me. I know he'd gotten like some demo money from Goldie, who is the Pearl Jam A&R guy. He'd gotten like something, or maybe he was even just floating it. Like, I don't even know what the initial deal was, but I know that like I didn't have to worry about flying my butt up there. Like they were gonna fly me up there. But it was still super low key. Like I was gonna crash at Alex's place. It wasn't like, you know, it wasn't like, hey, rolling out the red carpet, you know? And yeah, so it wasn't clear. It wasn't even clear that we were making a record. It was more like what I was told is like, we're going to jam. And if it works out, we'll record some stuff. And that was it. But I knew that like, I also was like, I sort of had my wits about me. I'm like, I don't need to take this too seriously, but like, I'm going to Seattle to go jam with one of the guys in Pearl Jam. And I've heard Shawn and Regan play. I've heard their other band. I know they're good. Like, and they've got a vibe. And I'm like, I'm definitely going to friggin' get my bass out and get my act together.
Yeah.
So I practiced hard for sure to get ready for it. Like, and I even like was thinking about ideas. Like I was like, oh, this is a cool thing. I'll bring this in, because I knew we were going to jam. I had no idea whether they wanted ideas, but I definitely had some things in my pocket.
So you go there in October, and I kind of, do you guys go out to dinner first and like, let's lay out the game plan, or do you just show up in practice space and you just start playing, or like, what is the initial get together?
Quite frankly, I don't even remember. We all knew each other, right? So it was like, it wasn't like, hey, Jeremy, meet Shawn, meet Regan. I think that it was basically like, I went up there, like I'm sure a plane ticket was bought for me. Mm-hmm. I went up there and I go to stay at Alex's house. I don't even know if Alex even picked me up from the airport, because he was at that point building Rock Candy Seattle. Portland. We already
Okay.
had the Seattle one. So he was going back and forth to Portland. So I think he was in Portland. There was another friend of ours, this guy, Brett Marks, who's like related to the Marx Brothers.
Oh, wow.
We all grew up on the same street in LA. He was up in Seattle working with, I cannot believe, like, I need to remember this guy's name. The guy who was like the video director in Seattle, who directed Pearl Jam Alive, Josh Taft.
Okay.
Josh is around. He's become a big commercial director, does a bunch of stuff. Super cool guy. Brett was working with Cowboy Films, I think they were called, and we were both living at Alex's place, just kind of like in this magical bubble of like Gold Rush Seattle, grunge Seattle, kind of like meals paid for, hanging out. So I go there, and I think the first time I see the guys is literally in this basement in what's called Belltown area of Seattle. I don't know what Belltown is like now. I think the Alligator or Crocodile. Alligator was LA. Crocodile was
Oh, yeah.
Crocodile is in that neighborhood. Lots of sort of one of those industrial neighborhoods with lofts and stuff that creatives were adopting. This is sort of pre-real estate boom in Seattle, or as it's happening, so that stuff was cheap. And so it was like meet in this basement, which is Pearl Jam's rehearsal studio, and I'm like plugging into Jeff Ament's bass rig, and okay guys, let's go. And I don't know if the first thing we played, they already had Buttercup as a instrumental thing that they were jamming on. That might have been the very first thing that we played. And it was like, they'd never played with a bass player on it. And it's just like, right away, like we tapped in together, and it was, well, you could feel like, I'm kind of feeling it right now. Like,
Yeah.
you could feel that we had a thing almost from like the first moment, like the whole. And I couldn't tell you, I mean, with any honesty, what the chronology of things are. I mean, I have scattered memories of what went on from there, but it was like so clear that Regan and I had a vibe together. And it was so clear that Shawn Smith was just in a space, like everything that he sang over whatever Stone brought in or I brought in was just like, holy shit. Like I brought in the bass riff for 20th Century which isn't even a riff. It's me literally on the E string, kind of muted, like, and like Regan dove into something, and right away Stone is going into that. I'm sure I'm slaughtering it, but
yeah.
And like Shawn, like right away is like 20th century, my friends, and I'm like, what is this? This is and he's like, are you making fun of me? I'm like, no, that is like the dopest shit I've ever heard. I'm not making fun of you. That's amazing. I mean, stuff like that happened like so magically and in the moment. And we spent maybe like a week jamming and writing stuff. I don't like with things like that. I know that Stone brought in Nadine. I'm assuming that, or whatever. I'm not assuming people know this record, but this is all stuff.
Oh yeah.
So like, I know that was like a guitar thing that Stone had. I don't know if they had previously worked on it, but it's like he would bring that in, and I would bring in like this thing that we called Manic. I think it became My Fingers. That was like a Stone riff, and like the song that became Ray's Love was like a bass riff that I brought in, this swinging kind of like, so not something that I think would be in Seattle at that moment, but this kind of like, and like Regan just has these feels that he kicks into, and then it's like Shawn comes up with this epic kind of feelings of Alice in Chains chorus, like this Ray's Love. everything happened like that, like instantaneous. Like I don't remember us like sort of like thinking about it. There was some weed smoking going on. I might have been on some sort of Puritan like mystic thing where I wasn't. I don't think I was. There was copious amounts of weed going on.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like some really just like the vibe between us was instantaneous and deep. And like, you know, Stone was feeling very confident. I think everybody was tapping into that. And Shawn, everybody had been working on their own stuff in their own ways and just like collided in this way that's like magical. It sounds like a cliche, but sometimes magic happens. And I've had that happen a few times in my music life. I feel completely blessed by those moments. Like it doesn't always happen, you know?
Yeah.
And that was one of them. And in a week we had all these songs. I can go on, but you can interrupt. Like,
Oh, no. I was so like, yeah. So you had all the songs. When did it become, okay, like we've got something here, and was it a pretty quick process? We got something here, let's get it out, because maybe was like Stone on break from Pearl Jam, or did it take a while to come out because Stone had Pearl Jam commitments, or what was the timing on the first record?
so I mean, so what happened from there? Like, do you want me to tell you about the recording at all, or just like?
I want to hear everything. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So it's like, I don't remember whether the recording was already booked or not. I don't know, or whether it was like Stone pretty quickly and was like, "Oh, stuff's going on." But like he booked time in at a Vast, this recording studio called the Vast, which I think I should know this. I'm sure it was 24 track, but it wasn't like they had two machines. For some reason, I think it was 16 track, but I think it was 24. But maybe some early Soundgarden had been recorded there,
Okay.
but like, there's definitely some other things that had come out of a Vast.
Mhm.
And it was a really cool place, small studio. And I'm forgetting what the neighborhood was like. So we jam for a week, and then we go, and it's like we record for like a week and a half, and record and mix. Basically write the whole record in a week, record and mix it in a week and a half. This is just like crazy in terms of maybe records. Like it's insane the kind of time. And there are definitely some moments in there that were like, and we're basically working all day. There was like a little cafe next to our Italian place where we'd go and take a break, eat dinner, drink a little too much wine, flirt with the super cute waitresses there. Like we were all, you know, like Shawn and me, like kind of, and Regan was with somebody already, but Shawn and me were like single and kind of like also nerdy. Like that was like a feature. I don't remember who those women were, but they were super cute. And then go back and work more. And it was just like, that was it. And like, I remember some things that were kind of some things went down super quickly. Like I think Buttercup was like a take. I know it was a take. I don't know if it was the first take. Shawn's vocal is what he sang while we were playing. Wow. I'm 90% sure. And there's lyrics in there that it's like, sometimes I don't even know if he was like, I know he wrote some stuff, but sometimes, you know, rest in power. He's not here to confirm or deny. Maybe Regan can weigh in and tell me like, Jeremy, you're on something. But so there was like things like that happened. And then like Nadine, like I know we actually had to do a click, and it was a little bit of a struggle. Like Regan has amazing feel, but at the time he wasn't really like a click guy. And so like we had a little struggle with that, but somehow in the end, it still feels great. Like it's not on the click. Like if you put it up to a grid, not really gonna work, but like somehow the wiggle worked. And like 20th century, this is early days of looping. There's like, they were like, oh, we're gonna do some loops. So recorded Regan, and then went over to Hart's studio, which is I guess London Bridge, to construct the loop. Brought the drum loop back. I think they looped Stone's guitar too. I'm pretty sure. No, they did not. Just looped the drums, came back, and I played my bass thing to it, did an overdub of some like slappy stuff that comes in different places where I'm actually playing some notes other than the doom to pam doom to pam. And and then Shawn did overdub his vocals there. And then like another sort of crucial moment, and then I'll like tell you about the mix really quick. These are just scattered memories, is that down I had written on this piano it was not like understood that I was going to bring songs in, but like I had written it on this piano at Alex's. Brett still remembers me writing it, and it had these totally obscure, weird Jeremy lyrics, but it was for me like a relative, like a song, like it had a chorus, like relatively straightforward song, like it had a chorus, right? Down, right? And then some word poetry, low. I would have to do research to remember what the words are. They're like fractured poetry stuff. And I did play it for them in the jams, and they were into it. And we recorded maybe to a click, like me playing the keyboard part, and Regan put some stuff down, and Shawn, I think, played some guitar, and I don't remember if both him and Stone did. And I did like one vocal pass, right? And I'm barely a singer at this point. Like I don't think I had done some demos, but like I'm really not like at all pro.
Right.
And I don't do one pass, and it's not happening. And Stone is like, okay, just do it one more time. And I get the distinct vibe that like, if I don't sing it this time, this thing's not going to make it. But it wasn't a bad thing. And I just remember like singing it, and they were like, great. And that was it.
Wow.
And so it's like, there was kind of like tenuousness in it once we were actually recording. And then we sort of mixed it like in a couple days. This guy, I don't remember his full name, Stuart Holloman or something like that. It was the guy who owned Avast. He had been engineering, or he had, no, there was a guy in the Pearl Jam camp, and I feel terrible that I don't remember his name right now, but he had engineered and was mixing it. And we left with like mixes. I'm, as I'm recalling this now, thinking that Stone actually floated this whole process. I don't think that Epic was involved at all.
Yeah.
And because it wasn't that expensive, and Pearl Jam was
Pearl Jam money.
I mean, it's like crazy. Like it's like the biggest band in the world at that moment. I leave Seattle to go back to LA, and at some point I get a call, and he's like, I played it for Goldie. Goldie's into it. We're gonna do some overdubs, and we're thinking that this guy Brendan O'Brien, who we like, is gonna maybe do some mixes. And I'm like, cool. And the first thing that I get that I remember, I think the first two were probably Buttercup and 20th Century for some reason. And they also had this guy Bashiri Johnson put some percussion on when Brendan started mixing. So there's like, he definitely added. I mean, Buttercup was what we did in Avast, just the four of us in that moment. 20th Century, there was some like percussion overdubs, and Shawn did some like just a little bit farther, like these classic Smith kid, that guy I love. Such a gene, like these classic Smithisms. And when I heard that stuff, I was like, holy, like the demos were cool, don't get me wrong, but everything had been done so quickly. And once Brendan brought his thing to it, I was like, wow, like this is really good. Like I just remember sitting in my tenement palace in Silver Lake. We lived in this place above a motorcycle shop next to this place called Los Globos, which became like, for a while recently, like a hipstery place where like alt bands play, but at the time it was Latin disco, like totally legit Latin disco, like nobody. And I remember listening to that in my place, like going like, we're on to something. Like, this is good. There's more to say, but
So at some point, does it become a business deal? Do you have to come sign contracts, and do you start talking about how you're going to split stuff up, or was it more organic and just sort of like roll with what's happening at the time?
yeah. So then it becomes like, it goes from that. That's all sort of the honeymoon, amazing, beautiful stuff. All the mixes turn out amazing. Like, I think the initial mixes were done just on a demo deal that Goldie could float through, and then like, to finish the record and or put it out, it becomes like, we got to do a real deal. We have like this dinner with, this is Michael Goldstone. Goldie was his nickname.
Okay.
With Michael Goldstone, who I'd never met, Pearl Jam's A&R guy. Also signed Rage Against the Machine. You might have heard of them.
Once or twice, yeah.
Yeah. Kind of was, making some awkward business decisions. And I think Pearl Jam's lawyer, this woman, Dana Cook, and we go have Thai food in LA. And coming out of that dinner, it was like, okay, we're going to do a deal. Shawn Smith is going to have to be committed to Epic because he's the singer. But Regan and Shawn, we're going to keep you guys kind of just like, you're going to be part of the deal. We'll all be quarter on everything. I'm like, great. But you're not going to be obligated to Epic because you're just like, you don't need to be. And I was like, great. And this is speaking out of turn a little bit, but like, whatever, like, I think it's worth it for people to know just because people still do record deals. Mm-hmm. There came to be like, while this is happening, I'm starting to play out solo and do shows at this place called the INXS. And I'm like, wow, like, I'm gonna be a solo artist too. And I have like this really young manager. This guy's not in the music business, but super nice guy. This guy named Wayne Combs. And like, the official contract comes through, and I get called down to Dana Cook's office in Westwood. It's like the big corporate music attorney office. I've got no attorney, right? And I'm just like told to sign this contract basically. And I do, and I'm kind of reading through it, and I think there's things that don't make sense about it, but I sign it. And then I take it home and I look at it more, and I talk to my manager, and I'm like, I think I'm committed to Epic. Like I don't think I'm supposed to be committed to them. Like, this doesn't seem, and it just became like this whole weird ass thing. And we went back. It was just like it got kind of screwed. She took offense that I didn't want to sign it. Like, I don't know if Stone got on the phone or whatever, but like, I ended up getting my own attorney because it just didn't felt like she took offense that I just didn't want to sign this thing.
Right.
And who the hell am I? I should be just friggin' happy to be aboard, which she actually may have had a point about. And I don't really know that like me being committed to Epic would have been the worst thing in the world. But like, I felt like I shouldn't be. And I felt like it wasn't, we talked about it Thai food. And that's just kind of who I was at that time. Like, we talked about, and I kind of like, it just kind of blew up in this really weird way where it was like, she got pissed. She spread dirt about me in like the whole Pearl Jam management office about me being a pain. And all I wanted it to be was the way it was, which eventually it got to be. Like, they put in an exception for me and the Jeremy Toback quartet. I think maybe I had maybe I had a group already, or was starting a group that I had with like Nels Klein, who you know now.
Yeah.
Amongst other things, like seriously one of my favorite musicians ever, and this guy Danny Frankel, like so I got an exception for that in the contract, but it was like at this sort of cost, and Stone calling me like, can't we need to go back to the spirit of where this was. And I'm like, dude, I kind of am, but I feel like it's getting misconstrued. And it sort of started a trend of there being, unfortunately, sort of like a division between, and just sort of a view of who I was with the Pearl Jam camp that I think was, you know, created by Dana Cook out of just like, I don't know what her trip was, like a power trip or whatever. And maybe maybe I was just like a knucklehead. I don't know. At this point, I don't really hold any grudges. At the time, it was really unpleasant. So
you signed it, and
I signed it. I got my exceptions.
So were you back in LA working? Did you go back to speed reading? Like, did you have a job, or was Epic, because of the contract, were you getting money for
I got
your apartment?
some money, and I'm sure, you know, and at that point, I'd already met this woman Fabienne, who became, you know, we're now split, but we're great friends and had a long history together, including our children. I'd met her before all that was going on, so she sort of became involved, and like I did get some money, so I was probably living off of that. I think I also started writing through her. She was like, I started writing coverage for scripts. I think that became my next sort of gig. So it's sort of a combination of things. And as that record was getting seeded to be released, there was like real buzz around it. I remember getting a call from Regan, one of those sort of famous last word calls, like never say this to anybody, but he was like, the label's freaking out in a good way. Like they love this record. And like everything coming out of Seattle was blowing up, including things that were maybe not, I'm not going to name names, but I don't know that they were very good. But like this record was cool. I mean, I feel like I can saying that just because like people love it so much. Like, and he was like, dude, they think we're gonna sell like millions of copies. Like, start shopping for property. And I'm sitting here like in my tenement palace and stuff, like going like, start shopping for property. Really? Like, and it feels like time gets compressed, but like before the record even gets released, like I'm listening to K-Rock, which is the most important station in the country at that point. And such a different environment than things are now. But like in that moment in time, I'm sure there were other stations, but I know that like if a song got on K-Rock and it did well on K-Rock, it was going to spread to the whole alternative world. Like they were kingmakers. And this was not even planned to be one of the singles. Like we made videos with Josh Taft for Buttercup and 20th Century. So we'd made those videos. I think those were already planned to be the singles. And this guy Zeke Peastrup at K-Rock had apparently gotten a hold of the, you know, pre-release CD or whatever. And I didn't know how this had happened at the time, but like I'm listening completely unaware that this is going to happen, and suddenly I hear Scream come on. And it sounds amazing, and the big na outro and whatever. I'm just like, I get on the phone and call up K-Rock before the song is over, and I'm just like talking to whoever answers the phone. I'm like, hi, this is Jeremy Toback. You guys are playing the song of the band that I'm in right now, you know? And they're like, really? And they put me on the radio with Richard Blade live after the song goes. I don't remember what the heck we talked about.
Yeah.
Stuff like that is going on. We're like in Rolling Stone, in some like a picture that Lance Mercer had taken of us at Avast, and we're in Rolling Stone. And I don't even know if I knew it. And I get like a call from my sister or something, and she's like in the Mark Morris dance troupe at the time, and one of the guys in the band is a rock fan. And he's like, yo, that's Toback's sister. And I get a call to find out that I'm in Rolling Stone. Stuff like that is going on. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, before actually even I think the singles get released, it gets killed. And there's another shadow side. Do you want to hear that story?
Yeah. I mean, obviously being a Columbus, Ohio resident and
tell me.
No, and being a Pearl Jam fan, like I can't remember how I heard about the record. I'm not sure that, the buzz had made it to Columbus, but maybe it had. I don't know. But I remember buying it at World Record, which was the second floor record store. I bought it on release day. So I definitely remember buying it. But yeah, my memory of it, I think what you're about to say is that like it didn't do those million copies sold.
Yeah.
Maybe like the promotion wasn't up, or and you can answer this for me. Like I don't remember if it was being sold as Stone's band or whether Stone's name wasn't prominent. I don't remember the release. I remember buying it, but I don't remember anything about the surrounding parts of it.
So, and I'm just going to light some incense here. Sadly, that whole thing, the reason for that is intentional, and it's not particularly cool. And it's one of those just like, I get why it went down, and I even, I don't even hold the people who are responsible. Like for a time, like I really just, it was just so heartbreaking. And I thought, what happened basically is everything that was going on, like it was set to explode.
Mm-hmm.
They were playing, K-Rock was playing a song that wasn't even one of the singles, and it sounded great. Like people, like it was just had the vibe, even though it was a weird record. Like I don't think it was completely in step, but it was like in that moment in time, something that was not, I mean, Shawn was not singing the way that, Lane from Alice sang, or Eddie, or Chris Cornell, like who all were different singers, but also had like a sort of like really big sort of bravado sing. Shawn is like delicate,
yeah,
and kind of like this sort of vapory, brokenhearted kind of R&B thing. It's like a different vibe, and yet, the guitars are there, but it's not like friggin' metal with a groove. It's like, no, it's coming out of some funky stuff, right? Anyway, like it just had a vibe where it was going to go, and I know that. I mean, whatever. It's like it looked like it was going to. But what happened is that Stone had not really communicated to his other band members that this was happening. And I think that there was a feeling in the Pearl Jam camp, I'm not going to get in specifics, that it was like, whoa, we're overexposed. This is like, we're already, like, we need to go away for a minute and figure out what we're going to be next. And they had all those sort of like conflicts about like, which is sort of crazy to think about. Like old rock stars were like, we're going to be rock stars, yo. But the grunge thing was definitely, and this is kind of, I think, coming out of Kurt, like the conflict of being like, well, like we don't want to be a part of this thing. We're singing about like not being part of the machine or part of like the anti-rock star thing, right? And so I think those things, I think there's also some hypocrisy in there, like some internal like whatever, but it doesn't matter. That was going on, right? So the shorter version of it is that both, I think, coming from the band on some level and from like definitely from the label and management, there was like tension about this record that was going to come out and that there was a lot of hype about, and like not wanting it to be seen as sort of like riding on Pearl Jam's coattails, even though it was legit its own thing. Like, and so the record was killed. And my people will dispute this, but I don't care. It's true. Like, there was definitely a word that went down to places like K-Rock, like, don't play this record.
Yeah.
And I have dear friends who I will not name, who were in the business at the time and at the time who previously told me like, that never happened, Jeremy. And I think they're just protecting the good name of other people involved. And I don't mean to trash people, but like sometimes people do bad things, and people who otherwise do noteworthy things, do things that hurt other people, and it happens in reality. And that happened in this case because, I mean, I think Shawn in some ways was the person most hurt by it, because like him and Regan would have been minted. I would have been in my own way, like we would have been minted as like legit artists who actually have an audience.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't happen. And that definitely, like, it happened intentionally. And so it's just like, sometimes that shit happens, yo.
It is. I mean, and that's why, like, I enjoy. I mean, it's not a great story for you to have to tell, but I enjoy hearing these stories because, from a music fan's perspective, who's listening to K-Rock or watching 120 minutes, things look one way, but there's stuff behind the scenes that we never know. I'm trying to think offhand. I can't think of a great example. The only example I can think of is a Butthole Surfers. I got an advanced cassette of one of the records. That I believe never came out. And I don't know the story behind that, but it was like Capitol sent it out and then didn't release it. And again, I don't know, that's so long ago, I don't remember the stories, but it makes you realize that there was stuff happening. It's all about, it goes from that organic, you guys jamming in a room and feeling the vibe, to business gets involved and the money gets involved and the conflicts and the relationships and what happens. And that's the unfortunately ugly side of any job, like whether you're an athlete or a musician. But if somebody is going to stand to lose some money or something, that might be some of the root of the evil here. And that because like I said, I don't have strong memories of that time period. I remember buying the CD, but also remembering, like, not necessarily, my friends didn't know what it was or didn't know who it was, and having to introduce people to it. And no, this is a guy, this is Pearl Jam. This is a Pearl Jam thing. And to, like you said, like, I remember, I don't remember listening to it for the first time, but if I can guess what I was thinking, the guess was that, like, this doesn't sound like Eddie, to your point, this doesn't sound like Eddie Vedder. What is this thing going on? Like, I don't get it.
Oh, interesting. That's
not,
cool.
Not that I didn't get it, but it wasn't it wasn't Pearl Jam. It wasn't Soundgarden, but it had Pearl Jam's name on it, but it doesn't sound like a Pearl Jam record. So then I had to, like, discover, so what is this thing? And I love it. I mean, I'm it might have been a little bit pre-writing career for me, but, like, I mean, I on board with Brad and Satchel, like, pretty early on, that it was just, there was special music being made by you guys.
Sweet. Yeah. I mean, it's like, the beautiful thing is that the record was good enough, and they did put it out, right?
Yeah.
Like, a deal was struck, right? So the record got put out. It didn't get shelved, which is wonderful. And people did find it. Like, it became a cult record, and people fell in love with it. And, and Shawn and Regan were able to go make Satchel records. I think that was sort of part of the thing. And, like, God, I'm wondering, like, the record did get, like, another sort of release, just sort of after the fact. It's just like, the good thing is, like, it did get into the world and people found it, and it was strong enough that people did fall in love with it. And sometimes sometimes that's just people's fate. I mean, I really, I kind of do believe in that. I do, like, believe in karma, and, like, and that sometimes, like, it's just what's supposed to happen. And it's, for whatever reason, some things, it's like Nick Drake.
Yeah.
Nick Drake makes 3 of arguably the most brilliant records of all time. I'll say 2 of them. And Brighter Later, I think, has brilliant moments on it, but whatever. They're amazing records. And people knew they were amazing records who made it, but nobody bought them. And went on one pub tour and bombed and hated it, and went back to his parents' house and, like, died of depression, essentially. And now he's probably one of the most influential. He's the progenitor of an entire movement of music, indie folk, which Renee and Jeremy, we can talk about that later, is part of. And it's because of a Volkswagen ad and digital and streaming, because those records could never be, stuff is just, it's inexplicable. Why wasn't he as big as Cat Stevens? I don't know.
I would say that that while the album, like you said, was killed and it didn't get the promotion in it, maybe I live in my own little bubble, but I feel like the Brad record is something that, the whole point of the Dig Me Out podcast is digging out stuff that people don't know. I would argue that Brad is still a known quantity, a known commodity that people know. Like people are still talking about Brad, so it wasn't a one and done or you were buried. It just didn't
Right.
do what you expected it to, or maybe had hoped it would do. But it's still being talked about. I think in part because Shawn is so prolific and people just
Yeah.
fell in love with Shawn that it wasn't just a fade away kind of thing.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. And that's like sort of, to me, the beauty of, I'm actually kind of a fan of listen, I love vinyl. There's great things about the way the music business used to be and the way music used to be. But there's also things that are amazing about the way it is now.
Mm-hmm.
One of the amazing things is that music that maybe didn't hit in a certain way, like Brad records would be hard to keep in print in the old model.
Right.
They're not hard to have digitally distributed globally, living at this point as long as streaming lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere for people to find and to share on playlists. And it's beautiful. Like that's, to me, is a beautiful thing as an artist and as a fan. I mean, I discover things like the singer of the Zombies, Colin Blunstone, has an amazing solo record. It might be called Misty Roses, that I discovered. I didn't discover it. It's been around forever, but I didn't know about it. And I'm a total fan of Baroque folk, like Nick Drake and Tim Hardin and all that stuff from the late 60s. I didn't know about it until like it was recommended to me by Spotify. And then I reached out to all my Baroque folk fans. I was like, how do I not know about this? And they're like, how do you not know about this, Jeremy? So it's like, circling back to Brad, it's like, to me, it's amazing that like, it's like people get to have that experience, and some kid is going to find Buttercup in like the Philippines, and they're going to be like, this breaks my heart. And that's so beautiful.
You know, I think we make up our own memories. And so like, I don't know if this is actually in the Wilco documentary.
Uh-huh.
I remember being in it, but I don't know if it's in it. But David Frick, right, from Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
That's his name. You know who I'm talking about?
I know the name for sure. Yeah. I'm sure I've read his stuff. Yeah.
I swear I remember him saying this, and again, I could be making this up, but I swear I remember him saying, because it was about the Wilco album that got shelved in the label deal, and it took forever to come out. And he made some comment like that labels are so invested in the money part of it in the promotion cycle, and it has to come out this day, and you got to get a placement on K-Rock or in Rolling Stone within a week of it coming out. And he made some comment like, there is a kid today who has never heard the Beatles, who is picking up a Beatles record for the first time, and for them, it's opening these doors. And we're talking 60 years later, and there's always going to be records that somebody did. And I think digital has helped that even further. Like back in the CD days, you'd still have to hunt it and find it. But now there's a kid listening to a Beatles record for the first time, right as we're talking right now, whose mind is being blown, and they're about to go on this discovery that you would have never imagined 60 years ago. Or
Beautiful.
about 60. Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's like, you know, I mean, whatever, it's sort of a guilty pleasure, but almost famous. Like, it's like, you know, there's the scene at the end where it's like, so what do you love about music? And he's like, well, to start with, everything.
Yeah.
And it's like, there were a lot of years where I didn't feel that way. And it's like, I feel so much that. And I love that part of to me, that's what's amazing about the way music is now, that it's so accessible for people, that people get to have that experience. It's beautiful.
So, you know, there's a whole lot of Brad stuff we could talk about, but I want to talk, but I want to talk about your solo stuff, because that's how I was a Brad fan. That's how I discovered your solo stuff. And I know that I've written this before, and I probably emailed this to you at some point, but my interpretation of Jeremy Toback's solo music was that I was a huge fan right from the get-go, but my memory of it was that like Dave Matthews was starting to take off. And I always thought if Dave Matthews is the college bartender who is a Grateful Dead fan and kind of making music for that kind of crowd, that you were like the coffee house poet who was working at the coffee shop. But in my mind, my friends who like mainstream and were Dave Matthews fans, I always try to turn them on to you, because I don't think at all you're the same or similar, but you're both like these solo artists who are creating great music. Yours was much more I don't know the word I'm looking for. philosophical and more
Right.
highbrow and more Ivy League than Dave Matthews stuff was. But all my friends, I don't know how many in the 90s, how many people I tried to turn on to your music by saying there's something, a connection between the two, and I can't tell you what it is, but
It's funny. Do you know that we were signed by the same guy?
no.
I mean, it's really funny that you mentioned Dave, because it's like,
Really?
I'm going to talk about Dave here for a second.
Yeah.
It's because it's wild because everything you said there is so true that we are like, I would used to say like, Dave and I like listen to a lot of the same records, but like different aspects of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we're not the same at all. And there is this connection. And there's an explicit connection. We were signed by Bruce Floor at RCA Records. Dave was signed first. Under the Table and Dreaming came out right around the time I was signing to RCA.
Wow.
And on the dark side of things, I was negatively impacted by Dave Matthews' presence on RCA, because they would sometimes not do things because they're the Dave Matthews Band. You can't do everything.
Right.
And entities like radio stations would punish RCA by punishing me, because they're like, well, we're not going to not play Dave because it's Dave Matthews, but we're not going to play Jeremy. It was that piece. And he's a friggin' awesome guy. And I remember seeing him play Crash for the first time. It's like a club show for RCA, and talking to the guys at RCA being like, that's the single. And they're like, you're on crack, Jeremy. I'm like, no. And they're like, first of all, we're not listening to you. What do you know about singles? You're our like crazy art rock signee. And I'm like, because I listened to the friggin' Monkees growing up, and I'm telling you, Crash is.
Yeah.
I don't know shit about most things, but I was right about that.
It's funny.
Like, if you get Crash, Jeremy, we'll break you. Here's the other thing about Dave. I texted him the other day, and he got my rabbi, dear friend, like primo box seats at the Hollywood Bowl. That's the kind of dude that Dave is. Like, he's like, either night, shall I say, Mr. Toback,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
In a sense, it's similar. In Columbus, when I started college, it was a band that had already been established, and they were signed to Sire Records, called the Royal Crescent Mob.
Totally know that band.
Do you know them?
Yeah, I'm sure I bought one of their records. Funk band.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, and again, these are late teen, early 20 memories, so I could be wrong, but it feels to me like the Chili Peppers got signed at the same time to Warner Brothers, a parent company. And to your point, it was kind of like, so we can put our eggs in one funk rock band, and do we put it in the Chili Peppers, or do we put it in Royal Crescent Mob? And they put it in the Chili Peppers and Royal Crescent Mob.
Yeah.
But you probably knew Royal Crescent Mob. Do you know why I'm going to say this? The connection so it's not a great connection. But the bass player for Royal Crescent Mob was Happy Chichester.
Oh, that is why I know their name.
Yeah.
But I also had their record separately, and I love Happy.
Yeah, and then he out of that he had a band, Howlin' Maggie, and still a great guy. Still lives in Columbus.
It's crazy. Like, I toured the only Brad tour I did later, which is sort of after the golden years. Happy was like our was doing a solo set, and sort of like our guy who would do like play different instruments. I didn't even know that Happy was a bass player, because the bass because Royal Crescent Mob was like doing some stuff. That's funny.
Yeah, in fact, they've had a little bit of a. I mean, they broke up in '94 and have never played a reunion show or anything. I believe the drummer might have incurable cancer, and the singer has gone through prostate cancer. They're reuniting in a month from now to play their first show since 1994, and I think it's all the money's going towards cancer research and stuff. But so it's a sad reason for a reunion, but it's pretty special, the fact that they haven't played since 1994.
Happy going to be with them?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, awesome. Hey, Happy.
The singer went on to become a tour manager, and he might even still be a tour manager for like Alanis Morissette and Jewel, and he's taken that path to his career. But
Amen.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go back to your solo stuff. So Dave Matthews stuff. Yeah. So RCA Records put it out. Expectations for you when you saw, like, were they promising you a lot of stuff, or was it kind of like let's push you out and see how it goes, or what was the vibe for that?
Like, I mean, God bless Bruce Floor for signing me, first of all. Like, the reality is that like, I don't think like that was a time where people were signing things they didn't really know necessarily what it was that they were signing. They just didn't, they knew that, still knew for a period of time there, what hadn't gone like completely like vertical horizon or like what all that sort of pop alternative shit. Like they still were just signing shit that they were like, well, maybe this will work. And I think I fell in that category, especially, and I had the Brad association. So it was kind of like, as my lawyer said, he's got blue blood. Like I had this cool reputation, even though I was making like, I got signed playing solo bass at this place called the Mint in LA. Like literally no band, just playing solo bass. And I don't think Bruce really knew what I was about musically. I just think he knew that it was cool. And I had this EP that I had made with this friend of mine, Brad Kaplan, I knew from high school, who invested creatively and financially in it. And Nels Cline is on it. And this guy, G.E. Stinson, who had been the guitar player in Shadowfax. I don't remember if this new age band, like a cool new age band who was on Windham Hill, but like kind of coming out of jazz fusion ambient, like not like cheesy. And they were part of the LA avant improvised scene. And so those guys, like I, came out of that sort of spirit that I told you I was in when I was getting into Brad. And we made this really dope demo. Chad Fisher, who you spoke to previously, helped bring Word Behind Words from kind of like a solo. We recorded that solo bass, I don't think with a click, and brought it into Chad, and he put drums on it miraculously, and it became weirdly. And I think he put this guitar down also that turned this thing that was like a dark horse on the demo into this beautiful ambient kind of epic, single, sort of art rocky single thing. So we had that, and it was I love that EP. It's one of the favorite things that I've ever been a part of. This guy, Gabriel Moffat, recorded it and mixed it. It was very homespun us, even though there's some super ringers on it. And people who've gone on, like Nels Cline he was a genius. Both those guys were geniuses, but it's not like they were like it's not like you were going in to make a record and people were like, let's get Nels Cline to play on this stuff. It's like he was literally working at an art bookshop in LA and playing crazy improv shit. He wasn't not known, even like just maybe starting to get inroads into like the Sonic Youth people, and eventually the people that would eventually realize that this was like a crazy jazz dude who could play, who loved rock music too. But I don't think I know RCA did not know what to do with it, and they were like, we're going to do a deal with Cherry Disc and do a fake indie deal and put it out and just let it go. We're not going to promote it. And another one of these things happened where Zeke, the guy who I mentioned to you, who was responsible for the Brad thing, getting into Richard Blade's hand, he wasn't responsible for getting killed. I don't know if we'd become friends or it was just like, he got a hold of my EP and got Word Behind Words. A couple things happened. Mimi Chen at this alt station in LA started playing this remix that we did of Less I Say that was kind of like had beats to it. So that was going on the sort of like AAA thing. And then, but more importantly, K-Rock started playing Word Behind Words while we were making Perfect Flux Thing, but they were playing the EP version of it. And RCA's whole trip was like, and Bruce's trip, and God bless his soul, was like, well, that's the art version. We're going to put big guitars on this. That'll be the hit. But I was like, and I just didn't have the wherewithal. Like, I didn't know, right? Sometimes you just don't know. And RCA did not put their might behind what was happening organically. And it was a mistake because the EP, and also I had made mistakes. Like rather than going with Brad to make my first RCA record, like we had like a falling out over stuff that was really like some stuff he had done, but me just overreacting like somebody doesn't know what the hell they're doing. And my lawyer had given me good advice, was like, whatever, Jeremy, you guys have a special creative thing, work it out. And I should have taken that advice. And I made Perfect Flux Thing with this guy, Craig Street, who produced Cassandra Wilson. And there's amazing people on that who I'm glad that I met, like Melvin Gibbs, who's the bass player of Rollins' band.
Oh, yeah.
Out of Avant, New York stuff. And this guy, Dougie Bound, who's like incredible drummer. And Ivan Julian, who was in the Voidoids, Richard Hell, like super legendary New York dudes, but also like, and all people who I love, and there's good things about it, but the vibe on the EP was unquestionably really more me, or where I was coming from. And it's just like one of those things where, you know, could have, should have, would have, but like didn't have the sense to do it. And there were mistakes that I made and mistakes that RCA made, and that we just didn't take advantage of, I think, what was really an important piece of work that could have become where I went, and it went a different direction, and, you know, became a mixed bag. I mean, like RCA, to their credit and Bruce's credit, like they did try and take a big swing, but Perfect Flux Thing was just not, which is the record after the EP.
Right.
Like it just, like the singles that we later sort of tried to put on it, which were California Phase and Perfect Flux Thing, were not like amazing. They were okay-ish. And the things that are beautiful on that record are like the really obscure ballads. And there was no song that was like the Word Behind Words EP version that was the thing that could, plus everything was had changed.
Yeah.
By the time that came out in 97. Like the stuff I was talking about was already, like Christina Aguilera was coming out, and on the rock side, it was we were already into, like, I can't even, like I opened for Tonic. And I like those guys too, but like this is not, like this is backwards hat music already, like what I call backwards hat music. Like it's already like frat music. And I'm not even like, that's awesome. Folks gotta like rock out to that shit. I got no problem with it. It's just not me. And so this whole combination of things happened, and like, you know, they put me on Lollapalooza, right? And I was on the second stage bombing every fucking day, like, because the music was weird. And it's like on the corners, like I literally would play 2 songs with my band, and like and I'd have like a good audience, and like over the hill at this amphitheater, I'd hear dum 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 dum, and literally there'd be a sea of flannel running away from me, and there'd be like 2 pimply haired, you know, dudes, pimpled, you know, like greasy haired dudes, and like a riot girl left, and the sea of flannel walked over. And it was like every day on Lollapalooza, that was my experience. I was just like, it was heartbreaking. It was
and that was after, that was the another true fiction. That's the name of the record.
That's perfect. That was like Perfect Flux Thing. I'm kind of, that was the first official RCA record.
Right, but I mean the Lollapalooza thing, was that?
Lollapalooza was Perfect Flux Thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's like, so I was just sort of saying that RCA did really try to push that in their own way. I mean, there were people, but there was nothing really to hang on to radio. And like they did send me out there with tour support, you know, like to be, you know, and I also did some boneheaded, like I made some like Brad's second record was coming out at that time. Like we did Interiors, which I sang a song on, and I don't think Interiors is anywhere near Shame. I think Shame is like whatever, like a beautiful special record, and there's wonderful things on Interiors. Like I think Day Brings is, I don't know, I'll break down the whole record, but Day Brings is a great Shawn Smith song, and I do like Circle of Mine as a me song, playing bass, and Shawn's harmonies are dope. But there's like a weird thing where it's like those guys wanted to go on tour, and I was stubborn about the way that they wanted me to go on tour, because I had my own band and my own solo thing, and we had they offered sort of a compromise version, which I should have taken, but I was just like really hard-headed and stupid, quite frankly. Like I should have, you know, it's like, we don't need to get into the details, but it's like shit like that when you're young and you're maybe have emotional baggage, you don't know what the hell you're doing. So it's like, there are ways that I shot myself in the foot that I could have made it much easier for RCA. Like me opening up solo, which is what they wanted me to do for Brad, on Brad's dime, while we are playing for an existing audience that Epic doesn't even have to pay for, because we're going to sell out club shows, and the club and the Brad tour is going to have vibe, because quite frankly, and God bless Mike Burke, who's awesome and can play and is a great dude, but it's like just a different story if like the guy who's in the band and go about the song, and we get to play Circle in Line, which people like, you know what I mean? Like just, and I was just stupid, quite frankly, and my apologies to Regan, and you know, everybody's good now, but it's like, at the time you think you're doing the righteous thing and you're just being a knucklehead.
Yeah. Does, you know, like I said, the podcast covers a lot of those like late 90s bands you're talking about that, and we like, I am a guest sometimes, but they always talk about different years and just how by the end of the 90s, it was boy bands and it was Korn and it was Tonic and Vertical Horizon, those kind of bands. It's impossible to answer this question probably, but I'm going to ask you to try. Do you think if you were that age and put in a record today, you'd have a lot more opportunities?
Wait, if
you were, when Perfect Flux Thing came out, if you were that age and that record came out today, do you think your opportunities would have been better because you weren't competing against a boy band? And
yeah, for sure. I mean, listen, we've talked about ways that like, even within the thing, there are ways that I clearly fucked up my own thing, that I think I would have had a different trajectory, even given the stuff that you're talking about.
Sure.
Like, and there were people that I think about that were coming up at that time, even though he's a very different artist, like Ben Harper, who's a guy like, I don't know him these days, but we knew each other back in the day. And that was a guy who him and JP, I don't pronounce his name right, but who was his manager at the time. Like they just had their heads on straight about where to fight and where not to fight, and where to make a stand and where not to make a stand. And those things are so important. And they allow real artists sometimes, which Ben is, right, to move through a situation that's not ideal. He also had other things going for him. I think Virgin really had his back in a way that RCA didn't have my back. But even in that, so there's that piece. But to answer your question, yeah, I mean, I think the environment now is better. I think that there's other things about it that are more challenging, though, which is like there's so many, like you have to be a self-starter. So it's like, how do you get your audience? You know, I mean, it's sort of proven itself out in that like Renee and Jeremy, we made these records with no label and like, admittedly starting in a different sort of segment, starting as making sort of like whatever Nick Drake, Elliott Smith influenced records for children, right? Families. But like, we have like a crazy legit career with no label.
Right.
We make money. Now, I don't live in LA money. Like I have to do some other things, but like we have 200 million streams. Like it blows my mind. Like on Spotify, like there's 100,000 people listening to us on Spotify alone every month. Who are these people?
Right.
What? You know, and that can happen, right? It doesn't happen for everybody. Like I know a lot of people who are like amazing. Some of my heroes who came around in the 90s, who I'm like, this guy is like a genius and doesn't have what Renee and Jeremy has, and that's weird timing stuff, and like maybe stuff will get rediscovered. Brad doesn't have what Renee and Jeremy have.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's building. I think people are, and maybe it will build and get bigger. It deserves, you know, its own thing. But so it's really hard to say. I mean, I know that knowing what I know now is a much better time for me, because it's like I've worked through a lot of the ways I used to shoot myself in the foot, and I don't do that.
I talked to Adam Elk from the Mommy Heads, and like in not seriousness, but we sort of were talking back and forth, joking as musicians that like and again, this is like not serious and not feasible, but you know, he was mentioning that like what you just said, if he knew now what he knew then, he probably wouldn't have even started his career until he was 40, because now he's gotten all that dumb kid stuff out of the way, and now he's doing it because he enjoys doing it. He's not worrying about record deals or sales. He's doing what he wants to do. He's not discounting his 20-year past, but he's kind of like, I wish I had this. I wish I knew this stuff then, because it would be different.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I totally get that, and at the same time, like, it's like the artist that I am now is so informed by how heartbroken I was by that whole experience.
Sure.
Like, it deepens what I say artistically. Like, I'm able to express things because I've been completely broken and felt like everybody abandoned me, and I had that inflated ego to make those stupid mistakes, and then to have that broken and be shattered literally. I talk about crying on the side of the road, literally on tour, just like, God, why hast thou forsaken me? But once you have that experience, you know, and it's not like, do you have to suffer to make good art? I don't know, but you have to. I think poets need to have their hearts broken on a certain level, because then how do you speak for, I don't know how you speak for the brokenhearted. I don't know how you do it unless your heart's been broken.
Yeah.
And furthermore, I mean, some people speak from the broken heart completely. I mean, I think that's sort of a Nick Drake thing. And like, I'm having a different experience. I'm speaking from a broken heart that I've learned how to mend. And I can share that through music. And that's part of what Renee and Jeremy is about. It's part of what my new solo music is about. And it's like, so it's like I treasure, like, for me, those things were not fun to live through. I mean, I was dropped 3 days before my first son was born. Like, nobody, Miles, Aaron Toback, who's now 21, nobody wants that, right? Nobody wants to go to lunch and have your, you know, like, agent, like take you out to the Ivy, go like, hey, by the way, I'm dropping you. You know, like, but, you know, I mean, sometimes it's just what an individual is supposed to go through. I know, it's just like, what do you take of it? What do you make of it? So, I mean, weirdly, like, I'm super grateful for it. I've never been more excited about music, and that's just the way it is for me. And I can see how for other people, it's not that way. I mean, like, you know, the world is not always, it's mysterious, you know, it's like, sometimes you're just like, why is that person, you know, I feel grateful for what's happened to me, that like Renee and Jeremy's big enough that I make money from it, and that it gives me freedom and the confidence to do stuff. And at the same time, I look at other people and like, they're not having the same experience. And like, you know, I don't even know if I want to mention, I will give them a shout out, because like Mark Eitzel and American Music Club, like, huge influences on me. And Mark, I think, and I know him, I haven't seen him in several years, but like, I've met him and we sort of stay in touch a little bit. I think he's like, just like a genius. And like, his music hasn't had that rediscovery moment. I hope it will, because some of those AMC songs, I mean, even stuff after their heyday, the song Patriot's Heart is like, go listen to that song. It's like, I don't know, it's top 100 song for me, you know, ever.
I don't know exactly the connection, but he's got a Columbus connection as well. I think he started a band here maybe when he was in college or something, or
because American Music Club is coming out of like San Francisco, and the whole Red House Painters San Francisco scene.
I'm gonna look it up because I want to
go that whole. But that's by the way, AMC is like that, is one of those bands that I think got caught up in the 90s dynamic that we're talking about. Like, they got the deal, they got like the Warner Brothers deal, and made like a crazy genius record with, you should cover this record. I would be so touched if you would. I think Mercury is a perfect record on the level of like, you know, records that have like those Talk records that got them dropped, that Radiohead would not exist without. Like Mercury, which is produced by Mitchell Froom, Chad Blake at their peak, the weirdest sounding, craziest record. Mark is at his songwriting peak. It is beautiful top to bottom. The secret track on it, Will You Find Me, is heartbreaking and gorgeous, and nobody knows that record. And it's just like, because it was too weird, and like and by the time that came out, like it was like, where does it go? You know, like it just wasn't the thing, and it wasn't even in step with the other alternate. It wasn't the Toadies, who were great,
Right.
whatever, in their own way, but you know, it wasn't Weezer. It wasn't like, just was like not that.
Yes.
And then on the other hand, you've got like Red House Painters become Sun Kill Moon, and that guy somehow navigates it. I'm not going to pronounce his name right. Mark
Kozelek or yeah.
I'm a huge fan, and that guy navigates and has a great career. Grump, he's a grump.
Yes. Mark Eitzel lived in Columbus when he was 19.
Oh.
He released one single in 1980. His second band was called the Naked Skinnies. They released a single in 81. He then moved to San Francisco with the Naked Skinnies. They disbanded in 82, and he formed American Music Club right after that. So
I saw AMC very early playing with this friend of mine's band called Pop Art, 80s Thing. And I remember not liking them when I saw them live. And then when Everclear came out, I was like, this is the shit.
yeah.
Like, sorry to go on a 90s tangent.
That's what this is all about. And so I want to talk to you about the last 22 years, and you've talked about Renee and Jeremy, but first I want to do, so I love that you've been name dropping, and I loved when I was talking to Chad Fisher and he mentioned your name, and I'm like, I know that guy. That's crazy. Tell me some of the other names from, like, I think I may have sent you a message that I got to meet some folks in Nancy Wilson's band.
Right.
And they were guys who played on your record. And when I told them that, they were like, maybe it was one guy, was it Chris Joyner?
Right.
And I,
right. Yeah.
And they did an in-store autograph thing, and I went down the line, and I'm like, the way that I recognized your name in that record store buying your EP because you were in Brad, I was like, did you play with Jeremy Toback? And he was like, how did you know that? Like, I caught him off guard.
Wow.
So tell me some other names of people who have done some other things that maybe
that I've been associated with or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, yeah, I mean,
like, did you play on anybody else's records in the 90s that, like, I didn't, like I said, when Chad mentioned your name and that he played on your record maybe, or he.
Yeah. So like, yeah, he was instrumental in Word Behind Words. Chad and I also wrote I Don't Love This Song, like my attempt to like make a single that would fit in with the Eve Sixes of the world or whatever, like You Make Me Feel. And it was kind of a hit.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Tampa, you know, kind of Goo Goo Dolls, whatever. Like, it's not my vibe, but like Chad and I co-wrote that song.
And his name is on the credits, right?
Oh yeah, he's credited. Yeah, he's credited. Like,
so that's the thing. I mean, I had that record. I mean, I still have the CD. I knew School of Fish, but I didn't until he mentioned it, and I went back and I'm like, oh my gosh, your name is here. So like, did you play on anybody else's records or any other people playing?
Like I didn't really, you know, like Mark Stewart from Negro Problem, a little obscure. He co-wrote Blood, White, Gold with me, which is on Perfect Flux Thing. You know, I co-wrote with a bunch of people on Another True Fiction, like weird people. Like Jeff Trott, who co-wrote all of Sheryl Crow's big hits.
Oh wow!
If it makes you happy, who was in Wire? He was in Wire Train, and then he was in World Party.
Oh wow!
So Jeff is still like like great writer, super cool dude. We wrote Will I Find You together. So there's more stuff like that. Like I just wasn't. It's weird. Like I don't feel like I got calls like from some local people to play bass, but I wasn't really like a studio kind of bass player. Like I was really good at a certain point, but I was like, in that way, Regan and I are pretty similar. Like Regan's not like a studio drummer. He's a great Regan Hagar drummer. You know, like Joel, who plays on my solo stuff and co-produces my new solo stuff, Joel Graves.
So I wanted to bring him up too. Yeah.
Okay. So like he's a guy like who I've been like, I know him through Brad. He was a huge Brad fan. And I met him on the road when I was on the road with Brad on that one tour that I went with Brad, which was unfortunately after the fact. Welcome to Discovery Park, a record I don't really like.
Mm-hmm.
And I met him on the road. But what was my point about bringing Joel up? Ah!
But it's funny because I was going to say Joel is not a 90s guy that I knew, but I've known him. I met him through Everest. But
Right.
Now, did he also play? I can't remember. There's somebody in Everest, and it might have been Joel that played on a Dig record, the band Dig.
Wow.
Again, flipping through album covers, and I think he was on. I feel like he was
Yes, I think that is a Joel thing. Like I don't like I. That's like one of those weird conversations that Joel like Joel and I like I don't know all of his early history.
I'm looking real quick because, again, that's like one of those things that we were talking about with digital music being awesome. You can discover the stuff you didn't know existed. That is the one thing that we miss by not having album covers, because I was the geek who was looking at and seeing.
Yeah. Oh, and so by the way, Chad played on the EP. Chad Fisher played on my EP.
Okay.
He didn't play on Another True Fiction. We just co-wrote.
Because I swear, so I got to interview and hang out with Everest a few times.
Oh, cool.
It's gonna drive me crazy until he toured. Yes, he first began recording and touring with the Universal Artist Dig in 1998.
Oh wow. Okay.
And again, after I met him, somehow I made that connection, and similar to talking to, it was Chris Joyner, right? Chris is his first name.
Chris Joyner played, so like in that touring band that was bombing every day on Lollapalooza, Chris was like my keyboard player. Like he played accordion a lot on that. And then like two guys in that band, Jinsu Lim, who played guitar.
Oh yeah.
And Dave Wilder. Dave Wilder played bass. Those guys ended up being co-writers and on Macy Gray's debut record. After that, or maybe at the same time it was sort of going on, and because they would always tell crazy Macy Gray stories. And I knew Dave Wilder weirdly from my Princeton days. He was a bass player in this punk rock band that played with my college band, and I was like, who is this bass player who's better than me? This little scrawny Jewish, like we were both curly head Jewish bass players, and I was like, why is he better than me? This little scrawny high school guy. So like there's weird circles like that. And like
Jinsu Lin's name has come up in.
I don't think Jinsu even plays music anymore. I'm sure he plays, but he's not like doing it professionally.
Yeah. Maybe I just know his name from your band, but that's the same with Joel. It's like when I approached Joel, having already talked to him a little bit, and then I was like, telling him that I knew he was in Dig. He's like, I don't think I've ever had anybody come up to me and say, "Are you the guy from Dig?" But
I know that name for sure.
They were like a one-hit MTV wonder with that song "Believe."
Yeah, I don't know it, but like I'd probably listen to it and maybe know it. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so that'll catch us up. So you did a band with Joel called, I can't remember. It's Chop Love,
Carry Fire.
Yeah.
Chop Love, Carry Fire. Like that's not even available. That was kind of in the bad years.
Yeah.
Like Joel kind of became like, well, ask your question. I can like.
Oh no. So I knew you put that out, and so Joel was involved with that. But you said Joel was involved with stuff that you and Joel continue to work on. Stuff
like sort of like sort of after getting dropped, like I started a yoga music label. We put out some records some of which I co-produced, which I actually kind of have a life. Like everybody we sign has like a streaming life, which is amazing. This woman, Donna DeLore, who's Madonna's backup singer for years. She's like a new age yoga market, legit artist. We put out Lover and Beloved, and I co-wrote a song of hers, Hey Ma Durga, which I like just heard the other day, because it's like if you search me on the internet, like it's there. And it's super cool. Like I love that record. We gave everybody their records back. This woman, Sadhasa Kaur, who does like Kundalini mantras. That happened. Our label totally flopped. Would have probably done better if we were just a few years later.
Yeah.
And streaming and stuff, because everybody's done well since then. I made these early Renee and Jeremy records, which had sort of an initial life, but it was also just iTunes was starting. and we're still relying on CDs. So it was like not something you could live on, but people love them.
Mhm.
Thing that I did right about those things is a friend of mine from college, this guy Dan Porter, who's like a digital entrepreneur. He's got like a basketball business. I'm not remember what, but he streaming. It's gonna be streaming, Jeremy. Like, you know, from The Graduate, plastics. He's like, I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, streaming it. The whole world's gonna be streaming. He's like, just say yes to everything. And that was the one right thing I did with Renee and Jeremy. I was just like, okay, TuneCore. Yes. And we just said yes to all the streaming thing. And I'm kind of like, at that point, like the Renee and Jeremy records I was able to make just because they didn't feel connected to my other music somehow. And so it's like, on the one hand, I was really brokenhearted and not even a fan of music. Like Radiohead would be putting out Kid A and Amnesiac, and I'd be like, I can't even listen to these records because they're getting praised for making the art rock that I wish that I was making.
Yeah.
And I sort of knew that on a certain level, but I just couldn't even say that out loud. And that's really where I was. I couldn't even like love music. But the Renee and Jeremy records I could make somehow because I was like, I'm making music, and I had young kids. I'm making music for my kids. And I was able to sort of cut through that heartbreak. The human psyche is weird. And we made It to Big World. The first record is it is a lullaby classic. I mean, it's crazy to say, but it is. And we made this beautiful, beautiful record. Kind of, I compare it to the experience of Brad, very much in that spirit. Wrote it incredibly quickly, recorded it incredibly quickly. A lot of it's live in the room that became her nursery around a mic. And kind of like a later record, we made a cover record like in 2011 before I stopped really making music. And that just kind of came out unconsciously. Every time I tried to sort of be conscious about making music, like our second record, I sort of was like, oh, we'll do this but more commercial. They're good things, but it's kind of screwed up. Like I just really didn't have it together because my relationship to being a fan was really broken. And Joel's one of these guys who, when I met him, which was before Renee and Jeremy, just Welcome Discovery Park, right around the time my kid was like 2. I'm touring with Brad. It's just a weird time. And I met him and we hit it off and we just became friends. And like, he was always really supportive of everything that I was trying, and everything I was trying, like there were a lot of stops and starts. And we had a band before Chop Love Carry Fire that did some recording with, you know, using New Monkey Studios, which is Elliott Smith's old studio that Joel co-owns. And then later, after some Renee and Jeremy stuff, but like sort of like around the time, I think of 2011, around the time of A Little Love, which was this cover record that Renee and Jeremy did that has done quite well. We did Chop Love Carry Fire with Butch, Butch Norton, who was in the Eels.
Oh, right.
Who I knew, some name dropping. I knew from friggin' Lollapalooza. The Eels were headlining the second stage, and their show was super cool. I don't know if you knew them from that era. Did you know them?
Yeah, not well. I mean, I have the big album, whatever. What was it?
Novocaine for the Soul.
Yep. I have that record.
So that period, Eels. And I think that there might be it might just be Eels.
Yeah.
Right. I want to be right about that. So it was the original lineup of Eels, and like E was kind of a little standoffish, but I remember like I'd eat, meals with Butch and Tommy, and they were super cool. And Butch's drum thing was nuts. And I was like, here's another name drop. Old 97s were also on the second stage.
Oh, right.
I remember commiserating with what is the lead singer name on
Rhett Miller.
Those guys are such cool guys. And I remember being backstage. We were both not doing that well on the second stage. And I remember Rhett was like, he's like, Jeremy, you and I are like cockroaches. They can kill us, but we'll just keep coming back.
Yeah.
And years later, I was like, he's kind of right. Like, I thought that actually I was dead, but like, I keep going back. So Butch and I stay in touch. He actually played some percussion live with Renee and Jeremy. He'd seen Renee and Jeremy do some stuff early on, like in like a club for a benefit. Like, and he was like, this is children's music, but this is dope, Jeremy. And so him and Joel and I, it was really before I had my thing together. We put together this Chop Love Carry Fire thing, and I really was trying to push it and make it happen. And it's kind of like rocky. I don't even know if I'm going to try and get it redistributed. It's like, there's good things about it. The guys are amazing, but the songs are not quite there. And it's like, it's just really, I think it's trying too hard. I think my contributions to it are trying too hard, but it's also part of this thing where it's like, there were people around me who were continually supporting me. And after that, I just kind of was like, you know, like Renee and Jeremy wasn't really making money yet. And I was like, I got to support my family. Like, and I got a gig as a ghostwriter for commercial directors, which is what I've been doing for the past 10 years.
Wow.
And I kind of went away from music, and I just, it's a good paying job. Like, I help commercial directors get their jobs. I'm totally behind the scenes. I'm not supposed to exist. Like, they're supposed to be writing these things
Right.
that are helping sell themselves to brands to get their jobs, right? But everybody knows I exist, but I don't exist.
Right.
And it's weird. It's like having that job. I really thought I was retired and sort of done with music. And Renee would keep coming back to me. Tell me, interrupt anytime. I'm just sort of waxing about.
No, keep going.
Like, every year, we made these first 3 Renee and Jeremy records, and like a holiday EP, which has a couple cool things on it and some songs that I don't love. Like, I think I love our version of Winter Wonderland is really dope. Check it out. But she would come to me like almost every year and be like, are you ready to make another Renee and Jeremy record? I'd be like, I'm really busy. Like, I'm just making money right now. And like, my gig's going well, and I don't have time to think about it. And I don't even know what we would write. Like, my kids are like in elementary and junior high. Like, what the heck am I going to say? Like, we're lullaby artists, you know, like, I'd be like, the band's not broken up though. We're not broken up. You know, one day we're going to make a record. And, you know, flash forward, like, this happened for years and years. And it's sort of right before the plague, what I call the plague. I think it's been a plague in many ways, like social plague also. Just, I feel like it's been so divisive and destructive. A subject we will not get into. Because my music is really like, I'm like, you know, like all this disconnection, like we need to connect. Like, that's really my whole vibe, is like, we need to connect. We need to connect most with the people we feel the most disconnected from.
Right.
That is what needs to happen right now in this world. Like, and I'm not just saying that. And then it comes from experience, like, oh, name drop. On the Road with Sixpence None the Richer, and Better Than Ezra in the Bad Old Days. This is for 1999. It's another true fiction with my hit that did not happen. You Make Me Feel. And both super cool, but I ended up on the bus with Sixpence had been a Christian rock band. I don't know if you know that, but they'd gone secular with Kiss Me. And like, they invited me because they saw me running around, like literally touring with these huge tour cases, like going through airports, like alone, no tour manager, nobody. And they're like, this is how you're touring, dude? I'm like, yeah, that's how I show up every day. They're like, give us a little bit of cash and just ride on our crew bus. And they were all born again Christians. And we had like the craziest conversations, because I'm like a spiritual guy and a Jew, but like a mystic, but not really like a traditional Jew. And like, they're born again Christians. So like, we kind of think you're going to hell, Jeremy, but you seem to love Jesus. I'm like, I do. And it was like this eye-opening experience where I'm like, oh, we can be really different and even sort of think really different things about people and still really appreciate each other.
Right.
Name drop and flash forward.
So perfect way to kind of wrap things up, flash forward. So the reason that you and I got in contact again after a little while was you put out a new single.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Do you want me to tell you like how this came to be, or we can be very quick? I've gone on. I mean, so what happened is that like songs started showing up a few years ago, and like I didn't finish them for a long time because I was like, I'd record like a chorus or a verse and be like, that's cute. And then at a certain point I was like, all right, Jeremy, this is insulting. Like the muse is sending you songs, start finishing these things. And that sort of started coinciding with the beginning of the plague, or it's like we had more time. And all sorts of things were happening. I was like, my marriage was falling apart. And like, start seeing new people, like crazy stuff, like, and it's like new songs start showing up that have a different subject matter. All this stuff is starting to happen, and this song Conjuring comes out of me based on, inspired by a certain human and also by some collective things. It's very much about like the connections that humans make that are completely unique to like you and I are having. Like you are you, Chip, and I am me, Jeremy, and there's this other thing that is happening that is Chip and Jeremy that's totally unique to us. Brad, you put me and Shawn and Regan and Stone in a room together, and that is us. And you take one of us away, you can still call it Brad, but it's no longer that. Conjuring is very much about that concept, which is like I'm conjuring a case for the space only you and I can make. And it was about this collision. I say it starts with a crush, you know, and like, you know, explodes into this thing about universal connection and beauty. And that I had written that song and it started recording it with Joel Graves, aforementioned of Everest, and this guy, Greg Cortez, goes by Killer Cortez, who's like the house engineer, but a solo artist in his own right. And this is all at Elliott Smith's old studio, New Monkey Rec Studio in Van Nuys. It's just like a beautiful place, and then like they're partners in my music, and like so much cool music is coming through there. It's a whole other thing. And lo and behold, Renee is like, hey, maybe it's now everybody's not doing anything. Why don't we make another Renee and Jeremy record? And I'm like, oh yeah, but I'm doing other stuff. I don't know. And our producer, Rich Jacks, who had done a little Love, which was the last record we'd done like 9 years ago in 2011, calls me up and he's like, I'm up here. I escaped from LA. I'm staying in Santa Barbara in Renee's guest house. It's not going to take a lot of time from you. It's beautiful here. Like it's like escape zombie apocalypse. Like, you know, all you got to do is come up here. Like I'll get your stuff done a day at a time. Come up here, drive up. It's beautiful. We'll make a record like in no time. Let's just do covers. It'll be dope. And I shelved Conjuring. Like I'm like, okay, fine. And I sort of like put Conjuring aside for a moment. We go and like literally a day at a time, we record this record, Whole Lot of Love, which is our last record, which has like covers of like the hit is sort of is kind of a hit. Once a hit, always a threat. I mean, this band you might have known, Guns N' Roses, had the song called Sweet Child of Mine.
I've heard of them, like I've heard of Rage Against the Machine. Like I have a memory of those bands, but I don't really know a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a cult band, you know. And so we do like this lullaby version of Sweet Child of Mine, which is I think super beautiful. And that there's also like cover of Where's My Mind by the Pixies, and there's some other really cool stuff. I love actually our version of Kids by MGMT is my favorite thing. There's also an original on that record. And we record that and we put that out, and that's doing its thing. And then like we come over, I'm like, oh my God, I have this other stuff to go finish. And I finish Conjuring, and that has just come out. And that's with Joel Graves. And it's like, there's a beautiful video that my friend Ron Hamad, who I might work for as a ghostwriter, as a commercial director. I might not, because I don't know if that's allowed to be said, but maybe. And that's part of like this whole stream of solo music. We have a bunch of songs we have like half a record that's recorded. That's going to be coming out a whole record will be coming out over the next year. We have like a song that will be coming out early next year.
Very, very cool.
At the same time that another, like in the meantime, another Renee and Jeremy, we've done another Renee and Jeremy record, which is going to be called Shout, which is a little bit of a joke because our music is obviously not Shout, but there's also, that is a giveaway, there will be a cover of that song by a band that you might have heard of. Yeah, we do like a weird mantra version of Shout, like because Renee and Jeremy keeps it family friendly. Like it's like super indie folk. Like this record is completely adult sounding, but we just our nod to our core is that like we just make sure that everything is something that you could play for your family. So it's like, and our first single from that is coming out. I don't know when this is coming out, but it comes out November 23rd. And it's As It Was, a cover with Gitalele and this weird, amazing sounding rubber string guitar and cello. And it's this beautiful, heartbreaking version of you might have heard of this guy. I think his name is Henry or Harry something Styles.
No, I don't know him.
I think the kids are fans. You might play big venues.
My daughter is a huge Harry Styles fan. Huge Harry Styles fan.
I mean, that is the best aha ripoff ever. Like the production on that song. You know, it's like I'm like, wow, how did nobody ever fight on Take on Me? Oh, it's not so close that they should be sued, but it's clearly like
that's crazy you say that because like I didn't make that connection, but you're totally right.
Nobody does, or very few people do. But it's like I'm like, this is Take on Me, but not.
So a little side plug. I interviewed the guitar player from Aha 2 weeks ago. They have a new record out that is really good. It's really good.
Cool.
Yeah,
I'll go listen to it.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, Take on Me, undeniable.
Oh yeah. Do you know that was like the released version was like the third or fourth version of that song? That it actually started. If you look on YouTube and look up like Take on Me original version, the guitar player had another band, and it's got a different. Maybe the verses are the same, the chorus. You can hear how it becomes Take on Me, but it's not the same song. But you can definitely hear that's how it started.
Amazing, right?
Yes.
Because it's like that song's perfect. Right.
Yes.
It's just like for what it is, it's just like the genius combination of everything. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think I would be remiss if I don't tie up this interview with this question. Going back to the 90s. So where are you today with the guys from Brad? I mean, obviously Shawn's no longer here. Were you still friends with him? Were you still talking to him? Or have you guys kind of gone your separate ways, or do you keep in touch with anybody?
We actually are friends now. And we went through a long period where it was really hard. And I'll share, this is a good question because it ties into actually some things that I talked about, which are really the themes that I'm dealing with, that are in Renee and Jeremy, but are also in the solo music. I'm very much into this concept of what I call radical forgiveness, which is forgiveness that does not ask for contrition or anything from the person you're forgiving. In fact, comes out of the Hawaiian tradition, and I'm going to completely mispronounce it because I'm such a gringo. Pono mono mono, but there's this Hawaiian prayer, which is, I'm going to get to Brad here. I am.
Yeah.
My storytelling, which is you say, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. And you do this prayer for the people that you have a resentment with. And in a way, you're taking responsibility for your place in a dynamic, even if you're like, that person did me wrong. You're like, but I showed up so that they could not be their highest self in this dynamic, even if what they did is terrible. And this can get in trouble with people who have had really bad things done to them. And I don't want to be there because it's like, but the power of it is that it's like you release, if you do it and you do it, you fake it till you make it, you actually practice it. It has like a transformative power where you can heal the past. And one of the first time that I ever did that I've never shared this, was with the guys from Brad, who I had like a really bad thing with. Like Shawn and I were not good. And I don't need to get into why, we just were not good. And things he did and they did and things I did. And there was this amazing moment where I'd been practicing it on those guys specifically at the suggestion of my rabbi friend, who Dave Matthews got the tickets for. And she's like, just try it. And I got a call from, and I'm going to share this, I've never shared what actually happened, from Stone. And he was like, hey, we're playing at the Roxy. You want to come up and play Buttercup with us? And I'd been doing that prayer for like a few months. And I was like, you know what? I do. That would be beautiful. And I remember walking to the friggin' Roxy. I parked. And I had I didn't have a bass with me. I was going to use their bass. And I was like, God, you know what? Like, I really love those guys. Like, these guys are my guys. Like, and it's not fake. Like, I love them. Like, they're an important part of my life. And we made beautiful things together. And I was like, this is an amazing feeling. And then, like, I get called up on stage. And I will share a lot of it, but I'm not going to share the specifics because it's between Shawn and I. And I get called up on stage, and Shawn Smith gives me, everybody goes crazy. It's the Roxy. It's not a big club, but it's Brad's fans, the ones who stuck around. They're not messing around. And they know who I am because, you know, it's like any cult band. It's like, oh my God, that's Jeremy. You know, like, I'm like, yeah, it's me, yo. And Shawn gives me a big hug and he whispers something in my ear. And I'm like, I love you, dude. And we have like this big hug and we play Buttercup. And it was like an amazing moment because I don't know if he was doing stuff on his own that also made it possible. I have no idea. We've never talked about how it happened. But like in that moment, we were like brothers. Like the brothers we are always supposed to meant to be. And it's like, to me, it's like, this is the possibility for everybody. This is a possibility for our culture. Like, yeah, I'm good with those guys. Regan and I are good. Like, I haven't seen him. I want to see him. Like, we talk. Like, I was super responsible. Like, you know, unfortunately, Shawn passed during it. Like, for like urging those guys to get Brad's music and now Shawn's music out digitally. I was like, stop with all this stuff. Like, everybody in the world needs to have this stuff streamed. You know, so like, you know, Stone is super helpful introducing me to people, like as we're discussing about like distribution for my new Renee and Jeremy and my new stuff. So yeah, we're good. We're really good. And like, I hope to see them. And I hope one day, maybe, I don't know, maybe we'll make some music together. Maybe we'll do something. Actually, Joel and I have a plan. I think Regan, I don't know if he knows yet. We have this thing, Regan has this thing that we call the Regan Shuffle, which is the groove that he plays on Buttercup. And I think he also plays it like on Suffering. It's like this thing that he does on the ballads. And we call it, it's Joel's invention. We call it the Regan Shuffle. And there's a song that Joel and I wrote, and we're like, oh, Regan's going to play on this mofo. We're going to get the Regan Shuffle on this one. So, yeah. So yeah, we're good. We're good.
Very cool. So I think this is a good point to wrap it up. You know, obviously awesome talking to you. Like I said, we trade emails, not all the time, but every couple of years. And so it's cool to be able to sit down and have this conversation with you, and just appreciate you taking the time to chat with us.
Such a fun conversation. I hope I didn't go on too long. I mean, like I can, yeah. So
I'm the same way. I get it. So very good.
All right, Chip. Super awesome talking, man.